This is the Toyota CHR, and it's a bit like one of these, a Prius, because it's a hybrid. So it's got loads of tech designed to save you money on petrol and also reduce emissions. But thankfully, it doesn't look like a Prius. So you're not likely to have people knocking on the window mistaking you for an Uber driver. In fact, particularly if you go for this new GR Sport version, they're far more likely to be saying,
"Nice car, mate."
but is the CHR actually any good? Well, that's what we're going to be finding out in this video, so stay with us and I'll tell you everything you need to know about the car. And if you decide you want to buy one of these, make sure you head over to our website, whatcar.com, because we could save you more than £2,000 on the brochure price right now. So that's the plug out of the way. Let's get on with the review. Now, the CHR has been around for a few years. It was launched back in 2016. And although there was a facelift around a year ago, the overall look of the car hasn't really changed a great deal. But this GR Sport version is new, and I should probably explain what GR Sport is all about. So GR stands for Gazoo Racing, and it's Toyota's motorsport division. And the GR badge is also worn by Toyota's fastest road-going cars at the moment. Those are the GR Supra and the GR Yaris. That's actually the best hot hatch you can buy at the moment. And if you want to watch our video review of that, just click the link up there at the top. GR Sport basically means you get the sporty looks, but without any extra power or higher running costs. So it's a bit like M Sport is to BMW or S-Line is to Audi. And if you go for a GR Sport version of the CHR, you get these bespoke 19-inch two-tone alloys. You also get a black roof, and you get a darker tint to the headlight lenses as well. On top of that, there is this all black or dark chrome, as Toyota calls it, front grille here. There is also sports suspension. We'll talk about how that affects ride and handling when we go for a drive a bit later on, and we'll also run you through the interior upgrades as well. Now, the CHR is actually a bigger car than it might look. It takes up roughly the same amount of space on the road as a Skoda Karoq. So theoretically, it should be a practical family car. But it isn't. Because somehow Toyota has taken all that space and packaged it in such a way that, well, you can see for yourself really. Yes, I'm reasonably tall, I'm just over 6 foot, and this seat in front here, that's set up for my driving position, but well, I don't really have any knee room at all. And although there are headrests, for someone of my height, they're pointless because if I lean back, my head just hits the ceiling. And things get even worse when you close the door because I've got a big pillar here by the side of my head, and these small side windows, they don't let very much light into the car at all, so it feels quite claustrophobic back here. It's also worth knowing that cars like the Ford Puma and Nissan Juke, even though they're smaller than this in terms of exterior dimensions, they have a similar amount of space in the back. They're cheaper as well. We'll talk about how much the CHR costs a bit later on. But if you only plan to put adults in the back occasionally, or you've got young kids in child seats, you get ISOFIX mounts, the standard on the outer rear seats in the CHR, then that isn't going to be a deal breaker for you. And given that rear passenger space clearly wasn't a priority when Toyota designed the CHR, it probably won't surprise you that boot space wasn't either. So there's less space in here than you'll find in boxier family SUVs like the Skoda Karoq. And if you're thinking, well, yes, but I don't want something boxy and arguably a little bit boring, then remember that you can get something like a Cupra Formentor. That certainly isn't dull to look at, and that has more luggage space than this as well. Also, a little bit disappointing is that there's no height adjustable boot floor, so you've got this big drop down from the entrance, and there are no handles on the walls of the boot either for remotely folding down the rear seats. You have to walk round to the passenger area again and pull them forward yourself. And when you do that, you're left with quite a big step in the floor of the extended load bay. So clearly, usability hasn't been thought about that much. But whether that bothers you really comes down to your own lifestyle and your personal needs. Fortunately, when you're sitting in the front, things are much better. It's actually quite roomy in here, and you feel like you're in something a little bit taller than a regular hatchback, which you don't in cars like the Skoda Kamiq, for example. And there's also a reasonable amount of storage space as well. You've got a rubberized tray here for your mobile phone, a cup holder just behind it here, and another one actually that's quite deep behind the gear lever. And if you lift up the front center armrest, you find quite a big cubby below there as well. The door pockets, They're fairly narrow, but you'll still fit a 500ml bottle of water there quite easily. So overall, pretty good for a car in this class. The air conditioning controls, they are a little bit fiddly because you've got these rocker switches here that you sort of need to nudge up and down to change the interior temperature. And I think Toyota has probably acknowledged that actually, because its more recent models like the Yaris, the Corolla and the Highlander, they've reverted to twist knobs for adjusting the temperature. But certainly this setup is much, much better than having everything in the touchscreen, which a lot of cars have these days, or for that matter, silly touch-sensitive slider pads that you get in the Cupra and Formentor. They are absolutely terrible. And quality, at least compared with mainstream rivals in this class, is really good as well. So you've got a lot of soft touch materials here and on the dashboard, and piano black as well. And even this sort of funky diamond pattern on the inside of the doors here, that's been given a rubberized finish, so it feels a bit more upmarket, a bit more expensive than it would do if it was just hard plastic. The infotainment system though, that is more of a mixed bag. Let's start with the positives. So the screen is quite high up on the dashboard, so I don't have to look down too far to see it. And it's also angled towards the driver. Again, that is a good thing. There are shortcut keys here as well. They are useful, although I'm not sure why they couldn't be made a bit bigger, because there's clearly space for bigger buttons here and they would be easier to find when you're driving. But the downside is that Toyota's operating system isn't very good. So not only does it look like it was designed in about 1999, the graphics aren't great at all, it's just sometimes a little bit slow to respond. And also, certain functions, there are more steps than you really think are necessary. You can just bypass it completely and use your phone though. You get Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard on the CHR, and to be honest, I use that all the time. The only downside is that you obviously do need a data connection on your phone to use things like the sat-nav. So if you go into an area with no signal, you might not know where you're going. And now's probably a good time actually to give you a run through the different trim levels, because if you go for entry-level Icon trim, then you don't get a built-in sat-nav, so you are forced to use your phone. You also don't get rain-sensing wipers, so that's a bit of a shame, but you do get adaptive cruise control, dual-zone climate control, a reversing camera and LED headlights. It also keeps the price respectable, so it's actually our favourite trim, and there are several packs you can add if you want a bit more kit. Dynamic trim is worth considering as well. That adds built-in nav and automatic wipers, but also front and rear parking sensors, heated seats, keyless entry and bigger alloys. And then right at the top of the range, there's this GR Sport and XL as well. Both trims cost exactly the same, but XL, that's more about luxury, so you get leather seats and a heated steering wheel, whereas in the GR Sport, you get the sporty looks on the outside that I mentioned earlier, but also a few more GR badges on the inside and a perforated leather steering wheel with this red stitching. Now there's a saying here in Britain, all mouth and no trousers, and it's appropriate for describing the CHR, or this particular version at least. It means that you can talk a good game, which the GR Sport does with its sporty body kit and big alloys, but you can't back that up with any real substance, and here that means with any performance. So this car has the cheaper of two hybrid powertrains. It pairs a 1.8 litre petrol engine with an electric motor. It's essentially borrowed from the Toyota Prius. And it gives acceleration that isn't very fast at all. This car would actually struggle to beat a Dacia Sandero in a drag race, so it isn't the best choice if you spend a lot of your time driving on motorways and A-roads. And because of the type of automatic gearbox it has, called a CVT, it can also be quite noisy. So if you push the accelerator pedal down more than the first few centimetres, then the engine revs suddenly shoot up. And unlike in a conventional automatic, where the revs rise and fall as the car changes up through the gears, here they just stay high until you're up to the speed you want to be doing, which can take quite a long time. It's absolutely fine when you're driving in the town and suburbs though. And actually at very low speeds for short distances, this car can actually drive itself along using just its electric motor. And you can encourage it to do that by pressing this EV mode button down here. But you do have to be very, very gentle with the accelerator pedal, because anything more and the petrol engine will just fire itself up. Anyway, the whole point of having a hybrid is to save fuel. And there's no doubt that the CHR is more efficient than most of its rivals, even diesels. And I'm not just talking about the official figures. In our real-world tests, the 1.8 hybrid averaged more than 50 mpg, proving particularly frugal on the town part of the test. There is also a 2-litre hybrid that's very nearly as efficient, and it should be a no-brainer because it's more powerful, so it gives the CHR better acceleration. The only thing that stops us from recommending it is the price. The CHR is pretty expensive, and going for the 2-litre adds another $1,600 or so to the cost, or about £30 a month on a typical PCP plan. You also can't have it with entry-level Icon trim, which is our pick, so that's another reason you might want to stick with the 1.8. Now, as I said earlier, GR Sport models get sport suspension. And if you want to get really technical, that means the springs are 10% stiffer at the front and 15% stiffer at the rear. And if you go for this 1.8 litre model, you also get a stiffer anti-roll bar as well. That's usually only found on the 2-litre models. And it all helps make the CHR feel a little bit more agile through corners, and it reduces nosedive under braking as well. And you can tell that time and money has been spent on setting everything up, because compared with most other family SUVs, the CHR handles really well. It's very composed, and the steering, that's actually been tuned slightly differently on GR Sport models as well. It feels naturally weighted, it gives you plenty of confidence, and it does make you scratch your head. It's a bit like Volkswagen investing a load of money making the next Golf GTI as good to drive as it possibly could be, and then fitting it with the engine from a lawnmower. Okay, that's a bit of an extreme example, but you get the point. The CHR feels like it deserves a more powerful engine, and also a gearbox that isn't just focused on fuel economy, but is focused a bit more on drivability as well. The ride is also very sophisticated for a car in this class. It's fairly firm, but if you hit a bump, even a nasty pothole, the car doesn't skip sideways, it stays composed, it's very well judged. It just has a slightly sporty edge to it compared with, say, a Skoda Karoq that's softer and altogether more wallowy. And actually, you don't need to go for a GR Sport version to get a CHR that's good to drive, because even the lesser versions are very good compared with most cars in this class. And as we suggested earlier, we probably wouldn't go for a GR Sport. As tempting as it is, it's a bit expensive. It starts at more than £31,000, and if you want the 2-litre engine, some Alcantara seats and an upgraded sound system, you'll be spending around £35,000. That sort of money would get you a really nice Volvo XC40, which isn't just a bigger car, it's also a better one in most areas as well. But if you're not too bothered about practicality and you really like the way the CHR looks, then the cheaper versions, particularly with this 1.8 litre engine, make a pretty good buy. But for lots more information about the CHR, just head over to our website, whatcar.com, and read our detailed 16-point review, which you can do by clicking the link up there at the top of the screen. And if you've got any other questions about the car, leave us a comment below. If you've enjoyed this video, then we'd really appreciate it if you could give it a like. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications as well, because that allows us to let you know about some of the really cool videos we've got coming up over the next few weeks, including an electric car triple test with a twist. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.